Forget everything you thought you knew about fairy tales. This is a story of love, luxury, and a scandal so explosive it shattered a glittering world. This is the story of Shekinah and Sarper. A story that begins with a whirlwind romance on a screen and ends, well, we're still figuring out where it ends. Because this is more than gossip. This is a documentary of a modern-day tragedy, played out in the most public and brutal way imaginable. And trust me, what you're about to hear will make you question everything about the lives we see online. Welcome, everyone, to a story of two worlds colliding. On one side, Shekinah. A name synonymous with glamour, with success, with a life built in the spotlight. An influencer, a businesswoman, a woman who seemed to have crafted her destiny with her own hands. On the other side, Sarper Güven. Equally famous, a figure of controversy and charisma in his own right. Their coming together wasn't just a relationship, it was an event. A merger of two empires. Paparazzi followed their every move. Fans dissected their every post. They became the ultimate power couple, a symbol of a certain kind of modern love, fast, fierce, and fabulously wealthy. But behind the filters, behind the carefully curated photos on golden beaches and in front of luxury cars, another story was unfolding. A private story. And today, we are going to dive deep into the chapters that were never posted. The whispers that became shouts. The allegations, the legal battles, and the moment everything changed forever, the pregnancy. This is not just about a breakup. This is about a divorce filed in a courtroom, a secret marriage allegedly revealed, and a pregnancy that became the epicenter of a seismic scandal. Our journey starts not at the end, but in what seemed like the beginning of a new chapter. The social media posts had slowed. The joint appearances became rare. The comment sections were filling up with questions. Where is Shekinah? Why isn't Sarper liking her posts? The digital ecosystem of their relationship was showing the first cracks. Followers, tuned into the slightest frequency change, sensed a disturbance. And then, the rumors began. Quiet at first, shared in encrypted messages and private forums. Whispers of a secret. A hidden ceremony. A bond that was more legal, more binding, than anyone had been led to believe. The idea was shocking. Why would two of the most public figures in the country hide a marriage? Was it for privacy? Was it for business? Or was there another, more complicated reason? Sources close to the situation, those who asked to remain anonymous for obvious reasons, began to paint a picture. A picture of a relationship that was intense, all-consuming, but also fraught with control and isolation. They spoke of Shekinah becoming increasingly distant from her old circle, of decisions being made that seemed out of character. The strong, independent persona she had built online seemed, according to these accounts, to be at odds with her private reality. And then, the most earth-shattering rumor of all broke through the noise. Shekinah was pregnant. This wasn't just celebrity news, this was a potential heir to a combined empire. This was life-changing. The narrative should have been one of celebration. But the air wasn't filled with congratulations. It was thick with tension. Because this pregnancy, according to the growing chorus of insider accounts, did not happen in a vacuum of joy. It happened, allegedly, within the walls of what was described as her secret husband's house. Sarper's house. A place that should have been a home but, in this emerging story, was being framed as something else entirely, a gilded cage where a monumental life event was unfolding under a cloud of secrecy and control. The timeline is crucial here. The whispers of a secret marriage and the confirmation of a pregnancy seemed to intersect in a way that fueled endless speculation. Had the marriage been hidden to protect an image? Or was it a strategic move that later became a trap? Legal experts we consulted suggest that a secret marriage, while unusual for public figures, creates a very real and powerful legal framework. It means shared assets, inheritance rights, and a formal process for dissolution. It is not a relationship you can simply walk away from with a post. It requires a key. A legal key. And that key rests in the hands of a judge. Which brings us to the thunderclap that made all the whispers a public reality. The news hit the legal columns first, before exploding across every entertainment and news site. Sarper Güven had filed for divorce. Not a separation. Not a quiet understanding. A formal, legal petition for divorce in a court of law. The filing was a cold, hard piece of paper in a world built on soft focus images. It made everything real. It confirmed, in the starkest terms possible, that there was, in fact, a marriage to dissolve. The secret was out, not through a loving announcement, but through the clinical language of a lawsuit. The grounds for the divorce filing became the next battlefield. While the exact contents of the petition are sealed within the privacy of the court, leaks and statements from representatives fueled a media frenzy. Allegations flew from both camps, shaping a public narrative of betrayal, misunderstanding, and irreconcilable differences. Sarper's team, through carefully placed statements in friendly media outlets, suggested a narrative of deception and a fundamental breach of trust. They painted a picture of a man who felt blindsided, who entered into a union under one set of understandings only to discover another reality. But Shekinah's side of the story, as it began to emerge from friends and indirect statements, told a profoundly different tale. This narrative spoke of control, of increasing pressure, of a vibrant woman being systematically isolated. The pregnancy, in this version, was not a moment of shared joy but a complicating factor in a deteriorating situation. It was portrayed as a vulnerability, a life-changing event that made exiting the relationship not just emotionally difficult, but logistically and legally perilous. The secret husband's house became, in this telling, the setting for her deepest vulnerability, a place where she was carrying a child while the foundation of her relationship crumbled around her. The public reaction was a volcano of opinions. Social media split into warring factions. Team Sarper and Team Shekinah trended for days. Memes were created. Past videos were dissected for clues. Body language experts were hired by talk shows to analyze every glance from old interviews. The comment sections turned into courtrooms of public opinion, delivering verdicts based on 15-second clips and out-of-context quotes. The human drama at the center of it all, the emotions, the fear, the uncertainty of a pregnancy during a legal war, was often lost in the noise of takes and hot gossip. And we cannot ignore the legal labyrinth this created. A divorce proceeding is complex under any circumstance. But add in a pregnancy, significant combined assets, public personas that are also lucrative brands, and the intense glare of the media, and you have a legal case of staggering complexity. Questions emerged that only a judge could answer. What would happen to the custody of the unborn child? How would the assets, the businesses, the social media empires be divided? Would there be prenuptial agreements, signed in secret, that would now come to light? Each hearing, each procedural step, became a headline, feeding the insatiable public appetite for this saga. The psychological toll on both individuals must have been, and continues to be, immense. To navigate a personal collapse, the most intimate kind of heartbreak, under a microscope of millions, is a unique form of torture. For Shekinah, to experience the physical and emotional journey of pregnancy simultaneously with the stress of a high-profile divorce battle is almost unimaginable. The need for privacy, for peace, for a safe space to prepare for motherhood, directly conflicts with the brutal, public mechanics of litigation and media scrutiny. For Sarper, every move is analyzed for villainy or vindication. There is no room for nuance, for human error, for private grief, in the story the public wants to consume. As we try to understand this, we have to look at the ecosystem that created them. The influencer economy. A world where personal life is commodified, where love stories are content, and breakups are public relations crises. Did this system, which rewarded them for sharing, ultimately make the private fall more catastrophic? Did the pressure to maintain a perfect image force secrets that later exploded with greater force? This story is a stark case study in the paradox of the digital age. The more you share, the more you have to hide, and the harder it is when the walls come down. We've reached a point in the story where the initial shock has settled, but the future is a vast, uncertain horizon. The court case grinds on, a slow, procedural beast. The pregnancy progresses, marking time in a way that the legal system does not. There are more questions than answers. Will there be a custody battle from the moment of birth? Will the two ever speak directly again, or will all communication be filtered through teams of lawyers and publicists? What will the long-term impact be on their individual brands, on their mental health, on the life of the child caught in the middle? This is more than a celebrity scandal. This is a human drama with Shakespearean dimensions: love, power, betrayal, inheritance, and a new life entering a world of conflict. It's a story about the masks we wear, the difference between the persona and the person, and what happens when the gap between them becomes a chasm that swallows everything. And this is just the beginning. We've only laid out the foundation, the opening arguments, the first act of a story that is still being written in real time. The court documents, the testimonies, the birth of the child, the final divorce decree, the aftermath, these are all chapters that are yet to come. The ripple effects of this case will be studied for years. It will influence how public figures handle their private lives, how the media covers such stories, and how the legal system adapts to the unique challenges posed by influencer marriages and digital assets. This story is evolving by the minute. And you have a front row seat. If you want to follow every twist and turn, every legal filing, every development in this unprecedented case, you need to stay connected. We are committed to documenting this story with depth, context, and respect for the human beings involved, cutting through the gossip to bring you the facts. So, do not miss a single update. Hit that like button right now if you want us to continue this deep dive. It tells us you're invested in this story. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. We are building a community here of people who look beyond the headline. When part 2 of this documentary drops, and it will, with new information, new analysis, and new developments, you will be the first to know. Your subscription is your ticket to the full, unfiltered story. Because this isn't over. Not by a long shot. The gavel has not fallen. The final chapter is not written. This is a living story, and we will be here to document it, every step of the way. This is just part 1. The divorce filing was the opening shot. The pregnancy is the ticking clock. What happens next will redefine everything. We will see custody hearings, financial disclosures, perhaps even countersuits. We will see a child born into a legacy of fame and conflict. We will see two people forever linked by law and by a new life, navigating a world that refuses to look away. The questions multiply. Will there be a reconciliation for the sake of the child? Or will this become a protracted, bitter war fought in the press and the courtroom? How will their fan bases, their business partners, their families react as new truths emerge? The journey from the pinnacle of a public romance to the cold anonymity of a courtroom is a steep and painful fall. And we are all witnesses. So, join us. Subscribe. Be part of this investigation. Because in the next episode, we will go even deeper. We will analyze the potential legal strategies from both sides. We will look at the financial empires at stake. We will hear from experts in family law, media psychology, and brand management. We will piece together the timeline with even greater precision, from the first rumored meeting to the latest court date. The story of Shekinah and Sarper is a mirror to our times, a cautionary tale, a tragedy, and a relentless human drama. And it is far, far from over. Stay tuned. Stay subscribed. The next chapter is coming, and you will not want to miss it. This is just the beginning. The real drama is yet to unfold. If you thought part 1 was explosive, buckle up. Because the story of Shekinah and Sarper is about to enter its darkest, most legally complex, and emotionally devastating chapter yet. The divorce filing was just the tremor. What came next was the earthquake. This is where the battle lines were drawn, not just in the media, but in the sterile, brutal environment of a family court. This is the story of a pregnancy reaching its term under the shadow of a lawsuit, of a child born into a headline, and of two people whose war would redefine the meaning of a public breakup. This isn't just gossip anymore. This is a legal, financial, and psychological dissection of a modern tragedy. And what you're about to hear will leave you questioning the very price of fame. Welcome back. When we left this story, the foundation had shattered. Shekinah was pregnant. Sarper had filed for divorce. A secret marriage was now a public legal fact. The digital paradise they had built was a smoking ruin. But this was no longer about social media posts or cryptic stories. This had moved to a realm governed by affidavits, injunctions, and the cold, hard precedents of law. Part 2 begins in the quiet, anxious wait between the filing and the first major hearings. This is the calm before the storm, a storm that would rage in two arenas simultaneously: the court of public opinion, which was reaching a fever pitch, and the actual court of law, where the future of 3 lives would be decided. The first major development was the issue of temporary orders. In any high-stakes divorce, especially one involving a pregnancy, the court often issues temporary rulings to establish stability during the proceedings. Our legal sources indicate that this phase became an immediate battleground. Key points of contention emerged, points that would define the entire conflict. 1. Residence and support. Where would Shekinah live during the pregnancy and immediate postpartum period? Her legal team likely argued for the right to remain in the marital home, the so-called secret husband's house, citing stability, security, and her condition. Sarper's side, according to prevailing narratives from his camp, might have pushed for alternative arrangements, possibly framing the home as his separate asset from a period before the alleged secret marriage. The outcome of this single motion would send a powerful symbolic message. Was she a wife in her home or a guest being evicted? 2. Financial provision. With both being high earners but with potentially intertwined and complex financial streams, the court had to establish temporary spousal and child support. This wasn't just about lifestyle maintenance. This was about medical costs, prenatal care, security, and legal fees. The filings here would have required a brutal level of financial disclosure, turning their success into spreadsheets and bank statements. Every luxury brand deal, every social media post's earning potential, every property holding was now a data point in a legal argument. 3. Prenatal arrangements and privacy, perhaps the most emotionally charged issue. Who would be allowed at medical appointments? What level of communication was required regarding the baby's health? Could statements be made to the press about the pregnancy? Our understanding is that Shekinah's side sought and potentially obtained strict orders regarding her medical privacy, attempting to carve out a space of dignity and peace amidst the chaos. This was the first legal attempt to shield the unborn child from the fallout. While lawyers fought over motions, the public narrative escalated into all-out war. Proxies became weapons. Close friends gave incendiary interviews to opposing media outlets. One outlet, friendly to Sarper, would run a story about demands and erratic behavior, quoting unnamed associates. The next day, a platform sympathetic to Shekinah would publish a heartbreaking account of isolation and control, from a childhood friend who hadn't been allowed to speak to her in months. The audience was no longer just watching, they were being recruited as soldiers in a digital conflict. Hashtags turned into battle cries. The human truth was buried under an avalanche of spin. Then came the inevitable, the official statements. Not from friends, but from the principals themselves, or their legal representatives. Sarper's team likely released a carefully crafted statement. It would have expressed sadness, emphasized his commitment to acting within the bounds of law and fairness, and perhaps subtly reinforced the narrative of betrayal that had been seeded in the media. It would have been corporate, precise, and designed to frame him as the reasonable party forced into a difficult action. Shekinah's response, when it came, was different. While also likely channeled through lawyers, the tone, as reported, was more visceral. It spoke of protecting her family, of focusing on the health of her unborn child, and of deep disappointment at the public airing of private matters. It didn't just address the legal case, it addressed the heart of the public perception war, positioning her not just as a litigant, but as a mother under siege. This dichotomy was crucial. One side argued law and principle, the other argued family and vulnerability. The court would have to navigate between these two frameworks. Amidst this, the pregnancy progressed. Imagine the surreal horror. Preparing a nursery while giving a deposition to your husband's lawyers. Shopping for baby clothes while your legal team is arguing over the valuation of your joint Instagram account. Feeling a child kick while reading news headlines speculating on its paternity or future. The psychological term for this is chronic stress, but that feels inadequate. This was an ongoing trauma, a duality of life and death, the creation of a new life happening concurrently with the legal dismantling of the old one. And then, the birth. The one moment that should have been sacred, private, and joyful was transformed into an international media event. Paparazzi staked out hospitals. News helicopters were rumored to be circling. The announcement of the child's birth wasn't made to family and friends first, it was a strategic communiqué. Who would announce it? What would be said? Would the father be named on the birth certificate? Would he be present? Every detail was analyzed for legal and symbolic meaning. The birth certificate itself became a document of immense legal significance, a piece of paper establishing parentage, citizenship, and inheritance rights in the middle of a divorce. With the child now in the world, the legal battlefield expanded exponentially. The case was no longer just a divorce, dissolution of marriage. It now contained the inextricably linked matter of parentage and custody. This changed everything. The court's primary concern, by law, shifted to the best interests of the child. This standard, while paramount, is also notoriously subjective. It opened new fronts of conflict. Physical custody, where would the newborn live? Given the infant's need for a primary caregiver, especially if breastfeeding was involved, the initial leaning of most courts would be towards the mother, barring extraordinary circumstances. But Sarper's legal team would have immediately begun building a case for substantial, unsupervised parenting time. This could involve allegations about Shekinah's mental state, her fitness, or her attempts to alienate the child from the father. Legal custody, who makes the major decisions? Religion, education, major medical procedures. For two people who could not agree on a press release, agreeing on a pediatrician or a school would be a monumental challenge. The court might be forced to consider appointing a parenting coordinator, a third-party professional to mediate these decisions, or even split decision-making powers in a highly specific, legalistic way. Child support, the calculations now became astronomically more concrete. Standard formulas, based on income and parenting time, would be applied to their vast earnings. But what is the income of an influencer? Is it last year's brand deals? The projected value of their channel? The equity in their businesses? This required forensic accountants, not just lawyers. The support order would be a number that would make headlines on its own. The discovery process in the divorce would have become a nightmare of intrusion. Both sides have the right to demand documents, communications, and evidence from the other. Imagine the subpoenas, every text message from the last 3 years. Every email. DM logs from social media. Financial records from every company and partnership. GPS data from phones to establish whereabouts. The goal is to find evidence of hidden assets, inappropriate conduct, or anything that could affect asset division or custody. In this digital age, that evidence is vast, permanent, and brutally revealing. Private fights, intimate moments, angry words, all were now potential exhibits in a court file. And let's talk about the assets. This wasn't just dividing a house and a car. This was the dissolution of a multifaceted business empire built on their personas. Social media accounts, who gets the joint account? What about the value each brought to their individual accounts during the marriage? Could one be forced to pay the other for the follower growth attributed to the relationship? Brand deals and endorsements, contracts signed during the marriage are likely marital property. But what about the future value of those relationships? If Shekinah loses a makeup deal because of the scandal, is that a marital loss? Business ventures, any companies started during the marriage, even if in one name, are likely subject to division. This could mean forced buyouts, sell-offs, or ongoing co-ownership between two people who despise each other, a business nightmare. Content libraries, the years of photos, videos, and content. Who owns the rights? Can Sarper use old photos of them together in his future ventures? Can Shekinah? The very history of their relationship becomes intellectual property to be fought over. The emotional and psychological toll now entered a new, even darker phase. For Shekinah, postpartum hormones, the physical recovery from birth, and the intense needs of a newborn are colliding with the demands of litigation, media scrutiny, and the grief of a marriage ending. The risk of postpartum depression or anxiety in such a toxic, high-stress environment is terrifyingly high. For Sarper, the public portrayal as a villain abandoning a pregnant wife and newborn, whether fair or not, carries its own profound weight. The alienation from his child in its earliest days, the constant legal defense, the erosion of his public image, it's a recipe for bitterness and anger. There are no winners here, only varying degrees of loss. The court likely ordered two critical steps: a custody evaluation and financial mediation. A court-appointed mental health professional would meet with both parents, observe them with the child, and make recommendations to the judge about custody and visitation. This report would carry enormous weight. Both sides would be preparing for months for these interviews, knowing a single misstep could be catastrophic. Meanwhile, teams of financial mediators and forensic accountants would be locked in rooms, trying to hammer out a property settlement. Billable hours would be climbing into the stratosphere. The incentive to settle is always high, as trial is ruinously expensive and unpredictable. But with this much animosity and this much at stake, the chances of settlement seemed slim. The public, meanwhile, began to experience scandal fatigue. The initial outrage gave way to a more complicated mix of emotions. Some began to question the narrative they had initially believed. Nuance, however unwanted, began to creep in. Was anyone truly the monster or the angel here? Or were these two deeply flawed people, trapped in a relationship that was toxic, amplified to catastrophic proportions by fame, money, and the digital age? The child, now a living, breathing person, changed the moral calculus for many observers. The jokes became fewer. The tone grew more somber. This brings us to the present moment in our story. The cliffhanger we are left with is not of drama, but of grim, grinding process. This is where the story currently lives, in endless legal filings, in preparation for depositions, in the silent, anxious wait for the custody evaluator's report, intense mediation sessions where millions of dollars and minutes of parenting time are haggled over like commodities. The final divorce trial, a public, dramatic airing of every dirty secret, looms on the horizon like a threatening storm. But it hasn't happened yet. And this is precisely why there can be no neat ending. Not yet. Because in stories like these, there is no happily ever after, only a settlement agreement and a permanent parenting plan. The ending is not a cinematic resolution, it's a legal document, dozens of pages long, detailing pickup and drop-off times, holiday schedules, right of first refusal clauses, and the division of stock options. The true ending of the Shekinah and Sarper saga will be written in two places: first, in the quiet, first moments a child spends with each parent separately, in homes that are no longer shared. Second, in the long, slow years of co-parenting that stretch ahead for decades, a mandatory partnership between two people who may never speak a civil word to each other again, bound forever by the life they created in the middle of the war they waged. Their digital footprints are forever intertwined. The internet never forgets. The child will one day be able to Google this entire saga. The story we are documenting now will be their inheritance. That is the final, heartbreaking layer of this entire tragedy, the creation of a permanent, public record of a family's collapse for the child to someday discover. This story is a mirror. It reflects the dangers of building a life on a platform, of confusing persona with person, and of waging private wars in public squares. It's a masterclass in how love can curdle into something unrecognizable under the right pressure. The legal battle may eventually end. A decree will be entered. Assets will be divided. A parenting schedule will be set. But the human story, the story of these three individuals, will continue for the rest of their lives. And if you want to understand the full impact, the final rulings, the aftermath, and the long-term consequences of this modern-day epic, you need to stay with us on this journey. We are committed to following this through to the actual conclusion, with analysis, context, and respect. We will break down the final settlement when it comes. We will examine the parenting plan. We will, with sensitivity, look at how this child grows up in the shadow of this story. We will study the rebranding attempts, the career trajectories, and the enduring legacy of this scandal. So, if you are invested in seeing how this real-life drama finally resolves, you must take action now. Smash that like button, it fuels our research and tells YouTube this is important, in-depth content. Subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell. We are building a community of critical thinkers here, not just gossip consumers. When the final verdict is in, when the last document is filed, we will be here with a comprehensive, final documentary. And you, our subscriber, will be the first to see it. This is more than a news story. It's a case study for our times. Don't miss the final chapter. Subscribe now. The conclusion is coming. And it will be one for the history books. The gavel will fall. The documents will be signed. But the echoes of this story will last forever. Stay tuned. Stay subscribed. The ending is being written in a courtroom right now. And we will be here to read it to you.